I posted on Instagram asking people what were their unpopular opinions on Marvel movies. And when they commented on the post, some of their thoughts were actually very similar to some of my thoughts on the Marvel movies. So today I'm going to be sharing you guys a hot take on some of the Marvel movies that are ranked pretty high for a majority of Marvel fans, but I would rank a little lower than them. First Marvel movie that I would rank lower than most people would is the movie Spider-Man Homecoming. Now let me just go ahead and be clear, I enjoyed this movie, I liked it. In fact, all of the movies that are on this list, I enjoyed gratefully. I definitely think that this movie is watchable, it can be funny at times. I really like Tom Holland as Spider-Man. I think that he probably is the best version of Spider-Man. But the problem is that when I'm watching Spider-Man Homecoming, I don't feel like I am watching a Spider-Man movie. I feel like I'm just watching a generic Marvel movie that happens to have Spider-Man in it. If I'm watching a Spider-Man movie, I want to really go in depth with the character of Peter Parker. He's definitely a fun guy, and that is what makes the Spider-Man character really charming, but the thing that makes it really special to me about Peter Parker is that you get to see the emotional aspects of what he really gets to go through in his own personal life story. But this one, it isn't really about that. It's just about him wanting to join the Avengers. Also, at times, when the movie wants to get serious, they usually get interrupted by a joke, and Marvel has the tendency of doing that, and this movie has that kind of problem. I also think the reason why this film feels a lot more like an MCU film rather than a Spider-Man film is because of how self-aware the studio is whenever we have a special opinion or a hot take on the MCU in general or on Spider-Man in general, and they play it into the film either as a joke or they do try and take that seriously. And I feel like it downgrades the movie rather than making it better. Like for example, in Civil War, they made some nods about how Aunt May is hot, and now that seems to be the punchline everywhere in Spider-Man Homecoming. And when the first Avengers movie came out, everybody was like, where's Spider-Man? He's a part of the Avengers crew as well. Well, now that he is having his own movie, the entire story is about him wanting to be a part of the Avengers. And this movie is not bad, like I said, it's fine, and sometimes it does act like a good Spider-Man movie, at least when it came to the twist in the third act. But for the majority, I felt like this movie was just made for the MCU rather than just being a solo Spider-Man movie that wants to be about Spider-Man. The next one that I want to mention is X-Men 2, or X2, I think that's what the movie is called. And I'm just gonna be honest, when I first watched this movie, I really liked it. I really liked the action. I thought Nightcrawler was a cool addition to the team. I really liked seeing Magneto and the X-Men characters like just teaming up together. Two foes just teaming up to go against a bigger threat that's in the movie. All of that stuff, it was really fun to me. But as time went on and we got like more Marvel movies, and as I went back and rewatched X-Men 2, I got more distant with the film, and I think it's because it was a movie that was good for its time. This movie felt like it had somewhat of a similar issue with Spider-Man Homecoming, like it had really good action, the casting was nice, I liked some of the story that it was talking about, but it felt like a regular 2000s action film rather than feeling like an X-Men comic book movie. If I'm watching, say, like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, I would say the dialogue, the atmosphere, the action, all of it felt like it was a comic book movie. That felt like a Spider-Man comic book movie. But when I'm watching X-Men 2, everything is good, but all of it doesn't feel like it's for a comic book movie. It's like a regular action film. The action scene in the opening with Nightcrawler is comic book-like. Wolverine moments when William Stryker was trying to attack the mansion was comic book-like, but there's like so far and few of moments like that in between this film that other times it felt like it needed to pace and move and slowly felt like a regular 2000s action film. And another thing that did kind of bum me out is that some of the stories that they have in here, while interesting, and I was for it, it didn't feel like some of it had a payoff, or they didn't go into it that much further. There was something going on with Wolverine in this movie, and I was really curious to see where it was going to go. But in the end, they just wrapped it all up by saying, well, I didn't need to know where I came from, or what happened, or what was going on. All that matters is what I'm going to be doing in the future. And that was such a letdown for me because there was so much build up to it, and I wanted to know more of what happened. And I guess the last thing, this might be a nitpick, but the last thing is this whole love triangle between Jean Grey, Wolverine, and Cyclops. I know it's a thing from the comics and they decided to put this in the movie. It's just a thing that I don't like in general. I hate love triangles. It's not fun, it's not funny, it's just stupid. And because this was in this movie, it dragged down the film a bit more for me. And another one that I'm going to have on this list that a lot of people will probably hate me for is Spider-Man 2. I think this movie is overrated. There's some really good stuff in here that I enjoyed. I really like the action. I think the effects were a lot better. You know, Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, the casting I still really like. But the thing that really did not work with me at all is the character development that we got with Peter Parker in this movie. And here's why. For Peter Parker's character, I understand that the essential thing that happens with him is that he struggles with things in life, and it is something that he needs to handle. But I felt like with the development that they did in this movie, he just takes 2 steps backwards and he gets bummed out, and then he eventually loses his superpowers. And I don't buy that with Spider-Man at all. I understand that the movie is trying to address that Peter Parker usually relies on his spider powers a lot whenever he feels like that he is Spider-Man, but I don't buy that Peter Parker bought all of that in general. To see him just constantly whine and say like, life is so hard, I'm bummed out, and his superpowers just get lost, I don't see that with Spider-Man. I feel like he would do whatever it takes to see if he can be able to overcome that obstacle. I understand the empathy with the character, but what also makes us empathize with him even stronger and makes us love him even more is that he is that character that would not give up. And I don't think this movie actually addressed that really good, because when it came to him and Mary Jane, they were just constantly on and off again. And when it came to that moment when he finally got his superpowers back, they didn't address anything about how he was able to overcome that obstacle. He was still whining and didn't even want to be with Mary Jane. And for a character like Peter Parker, who is supposed to be the superhero that we can all relate to, but also the person that we want to be like, I don't buy that whatsoever. It's a serious issue that I've been having with that movie, and I still have a problem with it to this very day. Up next is Thor Ragnarok. Not as much of an unpopular opinion as I thought, because there are some people that I talked to on Instagram and also talked to when I had an old YouTube channel that actually agree with me on this one. I think one of the biggest things that a lot of us universally agree on when it comes to us saying that this film is overrated is that there's so much comedy, and a good bit of times it's really forced in. And for me, it's not just that, but also when it came to some of the serious topics that were happening in the previous Thor movies, they kind of get interrupted by a random joke at times, and I really didn't like that, because I did take into some serious account of Thor's character in some of the previous Thor movies, or at least when his character was developing throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Another problem that I had with the film is that the CGI really felt fake in here. This is where the effects in the Marvel Cinematic Universe started to become a lot more obvious by the minute. It was hard for me to enjoy some of the action in here because of how fake and how much green screen effects everything appeared in the forefront in this film. Sometimes it didn't distract me that much and I enjoyed the movie for what it was, but for the majority, it looked super unrealistic. Now, I don't want to try and start up any kind of Marvel versus DC war here, but with Aquaman, that was what the movie Thor Ragnarok I wanted it to be. The jokes in Aquaman were worst, but the action scenes were amazing. The visuals were incredible. I knew that it was filled with CGI, but it was stunningly beautiful. When I looked at Thor Ragnarok, the effects looked cheap and fake. And for half of the times, the action scenes did not work. Now, at times, I did have fun with this. Sometimes the jokes could work. I mean, I do enjoy the cast in here and some of the new characters that were introduced in here. They were pretty fun. And when I'm just watching the movie on its own as just a really fun thing, it can be a fun movie. but as a Thor movie, really does not work. Some of the effects really are distracting, and the jokes, sometimes they're just not that funny. And the last one that I am going to mention on this list is Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, I am definitely going to be in the minority on this one. I think that this movie is a little overrated. I mean, it's a fun film. I've grown to warm up to it, and I do have fun watching it, but there are some problems that I just can't get behind. My biggest issue with the film are two things. One, the villain, Ronan. I really did not like what they did with him in this film. I thought that they made the character completely annoying, and considering some of the research that I have done about this character, he was supposed to be a lot more important than I thought he was, and it felt like that he was wasted. He just talked really deep and angry most of the times. It never felt like that he owned the movie. It felt more like a joke, and I never felt like that this guy was an actual threat. It just seemed like another generic Marvel villain that was going to be really easy to defeat, when in actuality, he could be really hard to defeat. So that right there, I really didn't like what happened. The other one is the really unbalanced tone shift between comedy and drama in this film. And the problem with it is that the characters are made to be in a film that's for comedy. And the chemistry between everybody can be good in the right moments, but at other times, I wanted them to stop bickering and just get over it, because it was starting to get unfunny. And also, when they wanted to get serious, I didn't feel any kind of empathy for them. The only time when I saw a character that was trying to be in between comedy and drama, and it worked, is with Peter Quill. The comedy worked at the right moments, the drama worked at the right moments, and never felt like that it was knocking over each other. His personality worked perfectly because I understood where he came from and why he is the way he is. With the other characters, I understand half of them for a comedy scene and the other half for a dramatic scene, but when they try to do either or, it just doesn't work. And when these characters make reckless decisions, whether it's for a comedy or whether it's for a dramatic moment, I'm just constantly asking them, what are you doing? Why are you acting this stupid? I eventually warmed up to all of them when it came to Infinity War, and a little bit of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but I wasn't a huge fan of that one either. In fact, I like that one less than this one. But I still have a really big problem with the villain and the way the tone is like. And those are all the Marvel movies that are so heavily beloved, but I find them to be not that great. And like I said again, I do enjoy these movies, but when people tell me that these are the best Marvel movies that are ever made, I kind of just question why. But what did you guys think of all these movies? And what are some of the most popular Marvel movies that you have seen that a lot of people love, but you don't necessarily care for that much? Put them down in the comment section below, and let's start a conversation about it. And like this video if you agree with what I say, or dislike this video if you disagree with what I say. I don't mind the dislikes. So that is it I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.